The first thing I ever did, okay, this is how long ago this was I put an ad in the paper that said, real estate investors wanted. And I got about 12 phone calls. That was for that first 11 unit deal that I was doing. And we raised, $600,000 off that little classified ad.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else with your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grinzik. With me, as always, is John Cohen. How you doing?
We are good. We are hanging in there. No complaints.
Yeah, absolutely. Been a good day so far. It's starting to get cooler, which is interesting. I was just talking to Mike, our guest, about that up in Chicago, and looking forward to it. I am definitely not a hot weather person, so excited for it to be in the 70s and 60s today. I think I haven't been outside yet, but
it's a nice morning.
Was it?
Yeah, it was like in the 50s. It was great. I had to go. I was supposed to be upstate, but my daughter was actually sick, so we didn't go upstate. So I had the microphone in the car, so I went out this morning, and the baby wanted to come, so I took her out with me, and I was like, "Oh, it's chilly. It's nice." Yeah. It was a nice brisk morning, which was nice. It was like actually a little bit of frost on the ground.
Was there?
Yeah.
Interesting. Don't expect that. Before we know it, it'll be winter. It'll be snowing, and we'll
be complaining.
Yes, exactly. But we'll enjoy it for now. It's pumpkin spice latte time. Not that I ever get it, but it's time for fall, and I'm excited. So here we go. But with that being said, let's jump into today's episode. We got a great guest on. I'm excited to hear his story, learn more about him, and learn from his as well. So with that being said, Mike, thanks for joining us, bud.
Hey, you bet. Thanks for having me. And I am not a pumpkin spice latte drinker either, but it's nice to wear a sweatshirt in the morning and go to the health club. And it was brisk this morning here. Yeah, it was nice. Yeah. But, here's the funny thing, right? So we're going to be complaining in a couple of months, and I live in the city, so I'll be fighting for a parking spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. So you stayed in Chicago while everything was happening, or did you take some time away?
No, I've been in the city. Well, I actually just moved into the city about 2 months ago. I was living in a suburb, in one of the south suburbs of the city, but now I'm living downtown. So,
gotcha.
I've been in Chicago my whole life. So,
gotcha. Just because I'm curious, I haven't talked to anybody living in another city. Was Chicago similar to New York, where when COVID hit, everybody scattered like ants, or no?
Everybody went inside. I don't know that they scattered, but everybody went inside, and the streets were desolate, and businesses were shuttered, and it just crazy. So people were inside.
Yeah, it was interesting here. Basically, 50% of this New York City population just left. It's like the most vacant apartments in like thousands of years in New York City are now available. It's up to which is crazy if you don't invest in New York. It's like 5% vacancy, and everyone's going like freaking nuts that it's up that high, because usually it's like 2 or 3%. But yeah, it was just mass exodus. Like people physically left the city. Like I left the city in March. So
where did people go?
Home or friends. A lot of people went to, because it was summer, a lot of people went to like the Hamptons or up to New England. A lot of people went up and down the coast. They did a lot of they tracked like mail forwarding. So like where were people forwarding their mail? They tracked like mobile data. So it was really interesting to see, especially early on. Basically what it was is anybody that could afford to leave left, except for a small minority of people. And then, the lower income middle class people were kind of stuck, stayed and battled it out. So it was very interesting to see.
Crazy.
But let's kick it off. Let's hear from you. Can you tell everybody listening just a little bit about yourself, a few minutes, just, your journey, what you do?
Sure. Thank you for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. And, it's always nice to network and meet people. I think that's what makes the business that much more exciting. One of the things people always ask me is, how come you like real estate so much? And I tell them, I say, it's because my passion is people and building relationships, and you can do so much of that in the business. But My journey, I think my journey's been lifelong. I got into real estate through the general contracting business. I had a contracting business for a number of years, did a lot of fix and flips and buy and holds, and I burned out. One morning I just woke up and said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I had 18 trucks on the street and 22 guys working for me, and I was like not happy, right? And so I took a year off and decided what I wanted to do. During that time, my wife and I had a house that we had rehabbed. It was actually a 2-flat. We rehabbed it and couldn't sell it by owner. I had a real estate agent come in and get it sold pretty quick. And I said, man, maybe I should go in the real estate business. And so I spent some time with that guy and asked him, if I could shadow him and he would teach me some things. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll do one thing better for you. And I'm going to date myself a little bit, but he said, I'll make you a cassette tape. And so he made me a cassette tape, and I listened to that thing over and over and over again, got licensed, went in the real estate business. And my first year, I sold 78 houses. Oh. And I was RE/MAX Rookie of the Year that year. And it's because I didn't know anything any better, any different, and I just did what he said to do. And success leaves clues. And that's my big thing. If we follow successful people, you're ultimately going to be successful yourself. And I'm a huge advocate of that. And I teach people that all the time. And so I was in the residential sales business for about 15 years, built a team. We were selling about 125 homes a year. 75% of our business was investor-based business, and decided in 2005 to go in the apartment business. So I went out and raised about $18 million. We bought $60 million worth of real estate, about 4,000 apartments in 5 different states, built a massive property management company, sold off the whole thing, unwound it, and went and built another property management company, sold that. And today I'm in the coaching and training space. Years of experience in the business, hundreds of thousands of dollars I've spent on books and tapes and seminars and personal coaching. And I put it all on one platform now to help other people, because I think giving back is something that we all need to do at some point in our life, right? So,
yeah, I love that. I think that's really interesting. So I want to go way back. What was on that tape that you thought made you so successful early on?
Okay, interesting. That's an interesting question. And I tell this story, and I don't think anybody's really ever asked, right? But so
that's what I'm here for.
Here's this guy, Todd. He was the number one RE/MAX agent in the northwest suburbs of Chicago for year after year after year. He was making $500,000 a year selling residential real estate before anybody else ever did. And and what he taught me was, go help them. He said, I've developed a strategy that will help people sell their house without using a real estate agent, and which is kind of contradictory, right? So I had signs made that were for sale by owner signs. We could pencil in or marker in their phone number so people could call them directly. I do open houses for people. I had lenders who would make up open house flyers and lender spec sheets for people. I put brochures together for them. I helped them stage their house and just basically told them what to do to market it. And 65% of the people I worked with in that capacity did not sell their house on their own. So they ultimately would interview agents or just give me the listing. So that first 8 months in the business, I took I sold 78 listings. I think I took 102 listings, all for sale by owners. Didn't know one person. And this is way back, right? I used to track the for sale by owner ads out of the newspaper. I would cut the little classified ads out. I would tape them to a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, punch holes in it, put it in a spiral book by phone number and prefix. So, the area I worked, there were 10 different prefixes. So each prefix, and I would just track them, right? And call them. And so I just beat the phone. I come from old school prospecting. In order to make sales, to make your business work, you got to prospect. You pick up the phone. I could tell you that I made 20,000 dials a year, and every dial I made $8 a dial. So, it took 240 listings and sold 125, and I knew my numbers. And I think any successful business, I know you guys have successful business, you got to know your numbers, because that's the way you get to where you're going.
It's funny. I love that, because as a former broker, when I worked at Marcus Millichap, even both of us have a finance background, and bottom line, make more calls, right? Don't complain the leads aren't good, or just make more calls. And if you make more calls, yes, you might, I tell people all the time, I'm a bull in a china closet, right? I suck at my job. I'm just going to make more calls than you. And eventually someone's going to say yes or no, or whatever it is. But I had this call yesterday with somebody who we wholesaled a mobile home park, and soup to nuts, at the end of the day, it broke out. There was X dollars available. So I said, here you go. This is what you get. He's like, well, I was really expecting this. And I said, okay, well, unfortunately, that's just not there. I said, if you would have stopped complaining about, it was a difference of $2,000. So I said, one, if you would have made a better argument, I probably would have given it to you. But two, I said, if you would have stopped complaining and worrying about what you were going to get, and if you made 400 calls, making another 400, you would have got another fee or another wholesale. So I can't compliment you enough or pat you on the back, or people have to hear that, because everyone wants the easy button, and there's someone else that I do a lot of business with that I want to put a system in place and everything's automated. Everybody wants to automate everything, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because we work on it every day on trying to put systems in place. But at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, if the world were to end and I'd be out of business tomorrow and I'd have to figure it out, I have not a fear in my mind that I wouldn't be able to make money, because I know that I could pick up my cell phone and I would just start pounding the pavement. And if people learn that training and do it, you have a guaranteed future of success. I mean, success is different. Maybe you're not going to make 20 million a year. Maybe you make 20 grand a year. But if you learn that technique and that skill, you're guaranteed income if you just make another call. And I'm so happy someone else said it, because people are probably getting sick and tired of me saying it. But I'm 33 years old, but I'm a big fan of just, forget all the bullshit, just pick up the phone and make a call and make something happen. So I love that. So I'm happy you said it.
Yeah, and there's a pretty famous book out there that says, ask and you shall receive, knock and it'll be open unto you. And that's it, John, that we just have to ask enough people for a deal, and you're going to get a deal. Yep. Ask enough people for a listing, ask enough people for a sale. And if you're a real estate agent today, listen, hats off to social media and video and content and all of that. But listen, nothing beats old fashioned prospecting. Nothing. So.
Yeah. I think it's interesting the way you phrased it, because someone I'm a big fan of is Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. And he always talks about putting yourself out of business. The example he gives all the time is, if you're a mechanic, you should be showing everyone how you repair your car, how you do oil changes, how you do this, what you look for, how to service your car, blah, blah, blah. Because the bottom line is, you don't know it yourself. You're going to go to the guy who's shown you everything that you trust, and eventually go and get their business the day you need it. Is there going to be the person that never comes knocking on your door to give you money? Of course not. But guarantee the person that does is going to refer you to somebody else that does need that. And It was just really interesting to hear you say that before the world of, I won't say internet, but we'll call it social media, because he talks about, doing it a lot in today's age, and you did it at a time, 10, 15 years before that, let's say. So it was really interesting to hear you do the same thing and how you had so much success.
And so what's crazy though, some of these trends have been around for years. I mean, even if you look at the social media and and I do it all the time. I post content out there, and I'm pushing my content out there and doing video. There was a famous car guy in Chicago. He owned like 12 dealerships around the city, and actually regional area, 3-4 states. He just passed away. But for years and years, he was deemed as the crazy car guy on TV, always doing outrageous and outlandish things and putting that stuff out on TV, right? You watch it during the Cubs game or the White Sox game, you'd always know that one of his car ads would be out there. And the funny thing is that event, those things he was doing back then is the same thing people are doing today with social media and pushing their content out there. It's interesting, that whole cycle, how that whole thing comes around. So it's the same thing with picking up the phone and prospecting. I just wanted to comment on John's $2,000 deal, right? So how many times have you worked with a buyer working with a lender who says, oh, for a quarter point, I'm going to go somewhere else to a different lender? For a quarter point, when you talk about a quarter point on a residential mortgage, you're probably talking $8 a month, right? It doesn't even make any sense from a servicing standpoint or production standpoint. So, John, I'm very sympathetic to that whole story. So,
it's amazing because I think that's fantastic. Just because to Chris's point and what Gary Vee says, and if you just put yourself out there, inevitably there are people that are just not going to do it. And they'll always pay or whatever it is. But there are, I get the listings all the time in my area, and there's owners that list their house and they always think it's worth more, and they have a picture and the picture's sideways and it's dark. And if you just went there and, like you said, and just said, hey, listen, do it this way and you have a better shot, inevitably, by providing value, you get paid. And that's the bottom line. And that's sort of what I tried to explain. I said, listen, it's not about the $2,000. If I didn't bring the buyer, if I didn't have my network, forget the $2,000 that you wanted, you would have made $0,000 because it wouldn't have gone full circle. So, people don't give enough credit to value producing until they're in the situation where they see the value that they've provided to get something in return. Because when everyone's starting or when everyone's learning, everyone wants, they read an article and it's like, oh, I flipped the house in, 20 days and made $80,000. It's like, yeah, I know, but you've been analyzing deals for 2 years and analysis by paralysis. Nobody talks about that part of the story. They only talk about the end of the story. And it's the beginning of the story and the hard work and what you do to get you in the position where you can sell 76 houses in a year or whatever it is. And it's just by listening and providing value. And then people don't realize the actual value component of getting a paycheck. If you provide value, you get value in return. If you don't provide anything, you're just a dime a dozen.
Right. Yeah.
So it was interesting to hear you talking about all the work that you did going through the classifieds and ads, and maybe it's a misunderstanding or maybe I'm right just because of the age difference. Do you think it was much harder to generate those leads back then compared to today because of technology, or do you feel that it was just a different route of going about it?
I think it was easier. I really do. Listen, back then the newspaper was an inch thick. Today it's 3 pages.
Right.
That whole section of classified ads, you could look through there, right? Now you got to find stuff on the internet and you might have 4 or 5 different ads for one house and it's crazy. It's chaotic where back then, at least it was systematic. And you knew that, hey, listen, you could keep handwritten notes. And I knew that I called this guy, 14 times, and that's a bad number. My average touch on somebody was 7 to 9 times in order to list that house. And my philosophy always was, hey, I'm going to list them. I'm going to call them and follow up with them till they list or they die. And here's the deal, right? That tenacity and going after the business is where the money's made. It's not made in the first call. And, as soon as somebody gets a little rejection, they typically go, oh, I don't want to do this, but if you got to fight through the rejection. But no, Chris, to answer your question, I think it's a valid question. I think it was easier back then. It was less chaotic.
So, and before you could, that's the problem, right? I'm a pen and paper guy, right? I want a notebook and I want to say I've called this person 10 times, 4 times, whatever. And typically I'm in the 6 to 8 range to get something accomplished. So right in that 7 to 9 range. And that's just because it's a different, it's a little different. And that's the sweet spot, right? I say you reach out to someone 6 to 8 times, you're getting closer, right? You've either got a little bit closer or not. So right in that same wheelhouse. But back in the day, and I'm not, 10 years ago, right? Even when I was cold calling, when I was a financial advisor, it was pen and paper in your hand. Now there's so many platforms and programs and things that say they're going to expedite it that I think people can get a little overwhelmed when I just say, take out a piece of paper. Even tracking my calls at Marcus and Millich app, it's a piece of paper and it says like, it's blank to blank, but 8 to 9 a.m. and then 25 calls and then blank to blank. And there's 5 rows and just put it in there, right? Every call you make, a circle if you got a connection, a line if it was a disconnect, whatever, just a simple form of that, you'll know you're making progress to a deal, as opposed to now, there's automated systems and you could upload different things to different websites. And because there's so much complexity, it actually makes it a little bit harder, and people don't dumb it down. And I think that's an important thing that people realize. And when anything they do, it's, I say keep it simple, stupid, like everyone else. And that, done is better than perfect. If you try and be perfect, the time it takes you to get perfect, I'm not perfect. I'm never going to be perfect. But the time it takes for you to think you're perfect, you could have accomplished so much by just doing it. And how often do I say, Chris hears all the time, done is better than perfect, right? I blasted out an email this morning for a deal. I put it together last night. I copy and pasted someone else's, but I tweaked it a little bit. But I had my wife read it to make sure I didn't spell anything wrong because I'm not the best at grammar. But I said, fuck it, whatever. Here you go, right? Get it out. And it's been an overwhelming response back. But done is better than perfect. And don't overcomplicate it, because you're right. It was easier because there was less available for people. Now there's so much available, it complicates things.
Hey, John, you know what they say? They say if you take one thing, it's theft, but if you borrow a lot, it's research. So
you go.
Copy and paste all you want.
There you go. I love it.
Yeah. So I'm actually very curious, and I think it'll help a lot of people listening. How did you translate the number of calls on the residential side to raising money from investors? Was it a very similar process for you? Like, did it take the same number of phone calls, or was it very different because once you get into that raising money from investors space, you have to treat it differently? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, totally different ball game, right? So here's what I did. I had a big investor base. So I started when I made the transition from selling residential to trying to raise private equity, and I started a private equity firm. I had a database probably of 2,500 people. Back then, Trump used to do these real estate university seminars, and they were weekend events, and he only had them like in Chicago, New York, LA, and Dallas. Well, we would go to Chicago, LA, and Dallas, and to have a booth at one of these things, it cost us about $30,000 for the weekend. So we did that. I built a database of about 8,000 people, and we hammered it. We emailed it. There was no social media then. It was all done by email. And what I did was I had a seminar in my office every week, Tuesday and Thursday. On Tuesday and Thursday nights, I would put 20 brand new faces in that room for about 2 years. And we just kept bringing people, and we taught them. I read a book one time. I consider it to be the best real estate investment book ever written. And it's called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, written by Gary Keller. And there's a system and a strategy in there that you can teach. So he had a system I used to be a Keller Williams agent, and he had a system that you could teach. And I taught that to investors. So I'd bring them in, we'd do a PowerPoint. At the end of the PowerPoint, we'd say, hey, here's a deal that we're doing or thinking about doing. And we started doing multifamily stuff. First deal I did was 11 units. And before I knew it, I was doing 200 and 300 unit deals.
So that's awesome. I think it's interesting because it correlates, I think, so well to today of just very similar strategy, just different mediums and platforms. Once you had those people in your database, it sounds like you did way more of email to try to generate warm leads and then have a conversation. Did you ever go the cold route similar that you did with the residential stuff, or you never did just because of the rules and regulations around it?
Yeah, we never did because of that, and there's that, like John would come to to come to an event and say, "Oh, I want to write you a check right now," and I have to say, "John, I can't take your money now." You got that 3-day cooling off period. Here's the documents now. Go to your attorney. Let your attorney tell you no. We did everything, like that, so that we didn't run into those issues where people would say, you took my money or anything like that.
So now there's obviously licenses from the SEC that you can get to cold call people, raise private money for, traditional investments like stocks and bonds, as well as alternative assets like real estate and private companies and things of that nature. Did you ever explore going down that route of opening a shop to then, you didn't have to go around those regulations? Because it's something we've talked about, never really gone about seriously, but it was a conversation we had. I'm curious if that was something you thought about as well.
Yeah, I spent $1.5 million walking down the road of trying to do broker dealer. Mm-hmm. It's a tough road to hoe. It's probably easier today because you have less regulations around raising money than we did back then. But it is a tough road to hoe. We spent 6 months trying to put together a platform for TICs. I don't know if you guys remember those, tenants in common. They were these tax incentive deals. And then that market just went away. All of a sudden, one day we woke up and that market was gone. And then we spent a number of months trying to put together retail deals to take to broker dealers, to guys who were licensed, and sell our deals. And here was the comment: the world is full of real estate deals right now. Nobody wants anymore. So we couldn't even market our deals. So we opened a retail shop, and we had our own broker dealers. And then 2008 came, and the whole world turned upside down like that. So it becomes interesting.
That happened early on when I was in finance. I was a stockbroker and I was cold calling and I was buying real estate on my own. And I remember when I left my job, I called my dad. I'm like, I have the best idea in the world. And this is 2011, 2012. In between 2009 and 2012, I said, Dad, and my dad's an attorney. I said, I got a great idea. I'm just going to cold call these people, and instead of having them buy stocks, I'm going to buy real estate. He's like, great idea. Can't do it. 100% illegal. Don't blue sky laws, and you have to file in different states. So it was like my dream was shattered immediately. But then, you like you said, you have to wait a couple days and, making sure you touch somebody and make sure you know them and give them a private placement. There was a way around it. It cost a little bit more money at the time. But when that happened to me, I was like, I hate stocks, but I love real estate. Why? everyone would love this. And my biggest objection when I was a stockbroker was, I own real estate. It's like, okay, well, take that objection off the table, but you couldn't do it. Now it's a lot different, and the rules are changing daily. So it obviously makes it easier to do, but it's still a good chunk of change.
Yeah. It's a tough deal. I think the first thing I ever did, this is how long ago this was I put an ad in the paper that said, real estate investors wanted. And I got about 12 phone calls. That was for that first 11 unit deal that I was doing. And we raised, $600,000 off that little classified ad. So it was crazy.
Sounds like a good ROI.
Yeah. $45, I think the ad was.
not a bad ad to run. Was that something? Because now, and I'm just curious if the way you phrased it, today you can't advertise for a specific deal and returns unless you file it a certain way. Was that it literally just said real estate investors wanted and they had no clue what it was about? Or
that was, I didn't know any better. I just did it. I didn't ask permission. Sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission, right?
Sure.
So I just didn't know any better. So
It makes sense, right? Because the same thing for me, it was like the good old boys club, and now it's such a popular thing, but people have been doing deals for such a long time, and it's when you speak to someone that's done it for a long time and has done a lot, it's like, wow, it's nothing's really changed, right? It's adapted a little bit to technology and to the times, and maybe things are a little bit easier now, but I agree with Chris, right? You hear about stuff and you don't necessarily get to speak to a lot of people that did it. So that's awesome that, that you can speak to the point that some other people just would never be able to.
Yeah.
So another question I have, you said while you were doing this, you built up a management company as well. And then eventually you sold it off to, I'm assuming, another group. When you were doing that, was that the end goal, to build up this company that owned a ton of assets, also had systems in place that you could sell off to a bigger company for a premium? Or is this something that just over time just happened, that somebody got interested and made an offer?
Somebody got interested, made an offer, and that was kind of the end goal. It was premature, but Lehman Brothers went away, AIG had some issues, and we decided to unwind. So,
Gotcha. No, I think it's interesting because it's something we've spoken about a couple of times, John, of like, hey, can we build up enough volume in a certain area and then, have it so it's somebody wants to buy it out. I mean, we've seen it. I saw it maybe, 5-6 months ago. There was a student housing company that had like 10 or 15,000 units, I think out of New England, but I could be lying. That just got bought out by like a massive company because they want the systems in place. They want to build scale, and I'm sure they got a nice little premium for everything.
No, 100%. I think it's definitely, we've thrown it around out there. We've thrown the idea around. I mean, it makes sense, right? There, you hear stories and then you're like, oh, thank God I'm not doing that. But there's definitely, it's the structure, right? I know that, there are people now that are working on a way to make this business saleable. Because right now, can you sell Toro? Can you sell that company to somebody? It'd be difficult because it's just, what are you selling, right? What's the asset that's of value? So how do you make it valuable? And that's if anyone's able to crack that code, that would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. So Mike, I'm curious, when they did make that offer, was there any specific part of it that they were very interested in? Like, was it the management side? Was it the properties? Or were they interested equally in the whole thing?
We split the deal. So one group took the one group took the properties, took the real estate side. Mm-hmm. They had their own management arm, and the property management company, we continued to operate for a period of time and kind of let it dissolve. Listen, there were some partnership issues going on and some things like that. So, mm-hmm. So we unwound that deal. And then I went and I built another property management company, which I sold. And they still run and operate that today. And I did that. I sold that to about 10 years now.
Gotcha. So obviously being able to build up a portfolio and two management companies, both of which seem to be successful, for anybody that is in property management, what do you think made you successful in those endeavors?
I believe that it's the same thing that'll make me successful today, and it's commitment, dedication, and a desire. I love real estate. Here was my first exposure to real estate. I was 8 years old, and I'll never forget this. I'm sitting on the side of a swimming pool with my dad. We're on family vacation, and I remember asking my dad about the room doors around this resort. How come there's so many rooms? And my family has no real estate background. And my dad, in his infinite wisdom, is telling me people come there, they stay there, and they pay somebody money to stay there. And at that point, I knew I wanted to be the guy that somebody paid me money to stay in my building, right? So it was simple. I think it's always been in my blood. And I love real estate. And today I love teaching other people and helping other people. We have an event coming up in October, and John, you're speaking at it, and it's an educational platform. I've got 20 top brand name speakers from around the country that are going to talk at this event and talk about, multifamily or some portion of the business. So legal, asset protection, insurance, whatever their game plan, whatever they're successful at. But it's an educational event that people can come to for $9 and get 3 days worth of content. So, there's a VIP upgrade. You can upgrade the VIP and get all the recordings if you miss anything, and you can play virtual cash flow game. I love your shirt, cash flow. Yeah. But we have a professional moderator who's going to moderate the game. And it's going to be a great event, a lot of networking. You'll be able to interact with the speakers in that. So there's going to be, I think it's going to be a world-class event. There's no doubt.
Yeah, it's interesting. How has the transition been from, being in the weeds every day? And you may have, a lot of ownership or other companies, I don't know, but transitioning over to that, educational consulting, teaching side.
Yeah, it's been smooth, very smooth and very receptive. It gave me that transition. After getting out of that, I spent some time with my family, got to spend a lot of time with my kids, and and still I'm, one thing about the real estate business is we can get so out of whack. The quality of life, I think, can deteriorate. John, I'm sure from being a broker at Marcus, right? That you're at your client's beck and call. And I think people's quality of life decreases in the real estate space. So what I want to do as a coach and a trainer is help people live a better quality life, more balanced lifestyle. Time management's a big thing, right? I think people systematically don't know how to live, and then they run into all this chaos, or they have a heart attack, and it's just simply because your life is stressed.
So when I was getting my license, I actually got my license at Century 21. And this was just another on the cusp, I'm sitting in my backyard. I'm a real estate investor, laying on a lounge chair, no shirt, bathing suit, my computer. And I'm like, I'm a real estate investor. Yeah, that shit didn't work. So I was like, all right, let's get a license. I Google it. So I drive down the road, Century 21 office, go in there, we'll get you licensed. And they had training programs. This is like, right after quitting my job as a stockbroker for Morgan Stanley and transitioning. It's like a 3-day period where I'm sitting in my backyard and I'm like, my mom's screaming at me because I don't have a job. Everyone's yelling at me because I'm lazy. I'm like, guys, I'm a real estate investor. Don't worry about it. Like, we're going to make money here. So the one thing I learned there, which is utterly critical, and it piggybacks off Mike's point, is Century 21, they said you are, as an agent, or in a lot of service businesses, you are basically, you work for your clients. One thing that they taught us early on was basically the time blocking strategy of, set your schedule where, let's say you do real estate and it is a Friday weekend event thing because that's when people are off and that's when you show houses. But that doesn't mean you can't schedule out 2-3 weeks in advance and say, okay, from 2 to 3 today, I'm going to hang out with my wife. From 3 to 5 today, I'm going to be with my family. And if you put that in your schedule ahead of time, and now a client calls and says, you can only come at 3. I have an appointment. I'm booked, right? I can do tomorrow at 10. But that's something that a lot of people in real estate or in business in general just don't do. They don't time block properly. So next thing you know, they're working 50 hours a day when all they had to do is say, I can't do that, guys. I'm tied up. I already have a pre-existing. But you don't have to tell people, I'm hanging out with my kid or I'm sitting in the backyard. I have an appointment. Can I do 4, right? And you just got to be strict and rigid on making sure you whether it's Sundays before the Monday or it's every morning, you set your schedule for the week, whatever it is. Yeah. But that's a critical part to maintain that work balance, that balance. Because if not, you're right. That's when people burn out, have heart attacks, bad things happen. And that was one thing I learned early on. And I implemented that to the best I could. And it's been amazing because you can take time for yourself, even vacations, right? I'm out that week, right? Or whatever it is. You just got to put that in your schedule. So to Mike's point, I think that's ultra important to make sure you know that. And if you don't know how to do that, educate yourself, learn about it. There's a million books, there's a million people to talk to, but in the real estate world, you could find yourself at 2:00 in the morning on the computer writing an email when, get it done and schedule yourself and schedule your time. And it's super important.
You're killing me on this whole subject, right? Because I got licensed at Century 21 too. And Century 21, great company, been around for years, but back then they had no clue how to train anybody, right? And their training program was, hey, there's your desk and your phone. If it wasn't for Mike Ferry and that guy who made that cassette tape for me, I wouldn't have done very well, But I followed that path. John, you talk about that time blocking. I have been an advocate of that. So I prospected, right? 8 till noon every day. Don't bother me unless there's blood. Don't knock on my door. I mean, that's how I was. I had an assistant from the second year I was in the business, and she knew that from 8 to 12, don't bother me. At 12 o'clock, if I didn't have appointments, I'd go have coffee and go home. It was just that simple. There's things that you need to have in your schedule that are that have to be non-disruptive. You can't change them. And then there's other things in your schedule that can be disrupted, right? So there's some things that are just non-negotiable, and prospecting is one of them. Building your business, working on your business is one of them.
I agree 100%. I think it's a skill set that people have. They don't know how to use it 100%.
Right.
So, Mike, over the years from yourself, and then as you've now spoken to thousands, if not tens of thousands of other investors, what are some of like the biggest mistakes and or the biggest positive things that people do or don't do that you think everybody should know or is extremely important or has helped people be more successful quicker?
I think taking action is critically important. And I think that's kind of been the whole context of this whole conversation this morning is it's about taking action, right? And if you sit around and do nothing, nothing's going to happen. But if you from a real estate investor standpoint, you could, sorry, John, you could lay on that lawn chair, with your computer next to you, or you could go out and look at property and make offers to sellers. I got a buddy in Detroit. He writes 100 offers a week to buy 2 deals a month. So when he's in a buying mode, and he's a residential investor, but he's got a strategy and he's got a percentage to an ARV strategy that he will not bend on. So he writes 100 offers a week to buy 2 deals a month. It's a lot of work, and not many people are willing to put the work in.
Yep. So that's the key to real estate. Real estate, not location. You make your money when you buy, like all those coin phrases, right? The biggest thing that I learned is working in the city, doing, rental sales, and before my commercial real estate days, see product. Bottom line is, I remember when I was talking to a local investor here, and I was sitting in his office, and I basically said, hey, I want to piggyback in. He said, come be an agent for me and learn. And I didn't take that opportunity, but we were bullshitting. And I still talk to him today. And he said, and I've said this before on the podcast, he said, you want to be a good investor? Wake up Saturday morning at 6 o'clock and go drive neighborhoods and see the houses that don't have cars in the driveway. See the houses that there's a tarp on the roof. See the stuff where there are problems and where there's nobody home, because 6 o'clock in the morning, almost everybody's home because they're sleeping from Friday night, or maybe they're getting home from Friday night. But you typically, that's when you can see problems, right? See where the gutter's bent or something like that. And if there's no cars in the driveway, write the address down. And that was one of my aha moments where it's like, okay, all I got to do is drive around and walk around and knock on doors and see if there are people living there. Yeah. And that's the thing, real estate 101. Throw the spreadsheets out. Don't worry about underwriting and ARVs and after repaired value and percentages, and don't worry comps, forget it. Go walk property and see property. Go to open houses if you're in the single family world. Go to apartment complexes as a renter and see what's going on. Okay, hey, this house has nothing and it's looking for 600. When you do that, you become more educated without even knowing it, just by seeing inventory, seeing product, and you will start to notice, oh my God, there's a deal here. This one's not much room left in it. And then you can start underwriting and, Go to Home Depot and walk up and down the aisles and write down the prices for flooring and write down the prices for cabinets. That seeing product and seeing stuff will teach you more than anything else. Then the question becomes, how do I put it into the pot, mix it up, and get a finished product? That, you need some help and you got to practice and underwrite and stuff like that. But seeing product is key. And when I first started on the multifamily side, it was 2 offers a week like clockwork. And if I didn't have a deal to offer on, more calls to get to the goal, to get a set of financials, and or I like the property, I would send out an offer. And that is just key. You just have to put offers out there and you have to see stuff. And people don't talk about that enough, because that will automatically correlate to success if you offer on 100 properties a month, 50 properties a month, 10 properties a day, whatever it is.
Right.
But that is absolutely key.
Everybody has their blinders on, right? So you pull out of the driveway in the morning, you turn the same way to the corner, you turn the same direction to go to the office. What if you went the other way? What if you pulled out of the driveway and went the other way and turned a different way to go to work in the morning? And you took a look at some of the other houses in the neighborhood where maybe the grass is a little higher, the gutter's bent, the car's not in the driveway, and there's a hole in the driveway, or, and you start to notice some other things. There's opportunity out there, right? And that's what you're talking about, is people miss the opportunity because they're just so, we live in this mentality. I equate it this way, social media today, I think that, it's really good and it does a lot of great things, but here's what it's done is it's taken away from this personal relationship. If it wasn't for Zoom or some of these video platforms today, we wouldn't be having this conversation here today, but people don't have substantial conversations. It's all texting or, listen, most people are too young to remember when we used to say things like, hey, I'll meet you in front of the Hyatt at 3:00. We'll go find a place to sit down and grab a cup of coffee. That doesn't happen anymore. It's so.
You don't even ring the doorbell anymore.
Yeah, right. It's about taking action though. So
it's great. So to that point, when I first started doing fix and flips, and in 2012 was the last fix it, or 2013 was the last flip that I did. I had 2 of my buddies that were my high school friends working for me. They're both delivery drivers. One, they deliver Chinese food. And I would tell them, you guys are the perfect bird dog. You're the perfect people, because you get a list, you go pick up the food and you drive it to a house and you take the fastest route. All you got to do, instead of turning down, William Street and the house is here, turn down this street and go this way. Take an extra 30 seconds to drop off the food. Nobody's going to care. And while you're driving down, notice something, right? And that, I told that to people all the time. I said, and what I used to do when I was fixing flipping houses, I would go to Google Maps and I print it out. And this is, not hard maps. I print out, I type in Mineola, New York, right? And then the map would come up and all the streets are listed. I take a highlighter out and I would drive down the street and I'd highlight it when I was done. And if I noticed a house, I put a dot on it and I put the address. And I would just take a different area every day, and I would just get in my car and go drive it and cross off the blocks. And then I've looked at every house in the neighborhood, and I knew that the market, 2% of the inventory would turn over. Well, as an agent, let's get a listing. As an investor, let's find the one that there's a problem. And those are little things, because like you said, everyone does the same thing when they go to work. Just wake up 10 minutes earlier, go the back street. Wake up 5 minutes earlier, instead of going straight, go off one road and go the other way the other day. And those are little tips to get involved and get started in your backyard with no questions asked, no headaches. And you will find things that you never knew were there.
Yeah. It's amazing, right? So
yeah, I remember. So my sister moved down to Florida after college in 2015 and would go visit her. And she lived in apartments until I think like 2018, she bought her first house. It was really interesting for me, the progress from when I started doing multifamily in 2016. And then over the years, how I started viewing going to her apartment more and more differently. And I'd start having like the work lens on of like looking at the rent and like trying to figure out what the property would sell for. And then like driving around, seeing other apartments, because there's way more apartments in Florida than there is in Long Island, at least like your garden style, 1960s to 2000 built, whatever. And then what really interestingly started happening was, as I started coming on Long Island more and driving around places that I had lived or had been around when I was younger, I never realized how many apartment buildings there were. They're a lot older here. Now they're building newer stuff in the last year or so, but I never noticed that they were there. And it's so interesting how once I started looking for it in work, I started recognizing it in areas that I had grown up in and known. And then as well, now that I'd been in Brooklyn for 3 years and I've come back all the way out east to Suffolk County, now I'm starting to look at like towns and neighborhoods and really starting to like analyze them from a work eye as well, of like, it's just a different perspective that I've taken a look at it. And as I've kind of driven to different areas and gone into new restaurants and food and seen different towns, places that I'd been, 10, 15 years ago, it's so interesting to see how I look at it differently once you start getting into that real estate mode. And I think it's very interesting when you're saying drive a different direction. I think it's awesome, but also like be intentional behind it. Like don't just drive and, not pay attention. Like make sure you're driving, actually looking for this stuff, look for the, the tall grass and the gutters and stuff like that. And over time, it'll just become second nature. Like one of my best friends, we joke because the house literally next to his is one of those houses, just dilapidated, rundown, whatever. And we keep telling him to buy it, fix it up and live there, but he doesn't want to live next to his parents, but be that as it may. Once you start getting into this world and start taking action, it's incredible how much you'll see that you hadn't otherwise seen when you weren't looking for it.
Yeah, right. For sure.
I've literally almost gotten into accidents driving down streets. Like, oh my God, do you see that house? And like, oh shit, there's a kid, right? Like I've gone to the complete opposite. And even my wife's like, what is wrong with you? You're not paying attention. I'm like, do you see this apartment complex right here? Like, let's buy this. Like, so but I take it to the far extreme, but no, I think it makes a ton of sense. And I know I'd be aware of time. I know this is Chris's role, but I'll say it. I think it's a great place to wrap it up. Mike, I'm super excited to be speaking at your event. I have my presentation done. I'll be getting over to you shortly.
I don't believe you. It's not done yet.
We really appreciate you coming on, speaking your mind. And, tell people, best place to get in contact with you, where to reach you, if they want to find out anything more about you.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate you guys having me on. This has been fun. So you guys have made me kind of think about some things that I haven't thought about in years. So it's interesting. Awesome. But yeah, you can reach me at My Core Intentions. That's Mike at mycoreintentions.com. And, if I can do anything, answer any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I'd be more than happy to help you. Remember, our event is in October. You could go on the website for that is multifamilyglobalsummit.com.
Awesome. Beautiful, guys. Definitely go check that out. We will have the links and his email in the description and the show notes. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you're not already subscribed, it would mean the world to John and I if you do so. And if you are, please send it to friend, family member, colleague that you think would get a tremendous amount of value from it. Mike, once again, thanks for coming on. This was absolutely incredible.